Okay. All right. So welcome, everybody. We're really, really privileged to have in our presence Imogen and Elle. And really, they're here to kind of share with us in our programme for Seize the Day for our Year 12 students, to really inspire them and infuse them with all the kind of skills and the kind of give them a toolkit as to how they achieve their success. So let's start off by kind of getting an idea as to who you are and what you do for a living, really. So if you'd like to start, Imogen?
Yeah, sure. I work as an editor on an art magazine. I'm the deputy editor of a magazine called RA Magazine, which is published by an art museum called the Royal Academy of Arts.
Okay. And Elle?
Hi, I'm Elle. I'm a podcast producer, so that means I make podcasts from start to finish.
Cool. All right. So if you could kind of share with us how you got to where you've got to in your careers, really. What's your journey?
Shall I go first again?
Yeah.
I didn't really have much of a plan on leaving uni. I did English and I knew I really liked writing, but I wasn't so interested in some of the careers that people who do English often go and do, like publishing. And I've always been really interested in photography and visual art. So I was keen to work across both of those things. So writing about art was kind of a dream. But I did a lot of other jobs on the side, like copywriting and making content for brands and things like that, and communications roles. And I was a freelance art writer alongside this, which just meant that in my evenings and on weekends, I would pitch to editors and try and get commissions. And from there, I got my first job on a magazine.
Okay.
Nice. So I went to university and I studied philosophy at Leeds University. But from the get-go, week one, I went to the Freshers' Fair and saw the Leeds Student Radio stall. So applied for a radio show there, which I got, called Live and Kicking Again. It was a 90s music show. And then from then on, always had a show on Leeds Student Radio for the 3 years I was there. I had lots of different types of shows. Leaving university, I knew I wanted to go into radio, but it was just easier to get, well, I knew I wanted to go into the broadcast industry, but it's easier to get anything on radio. So I was a runner on TV shows like Family Fortunes and what's wrong with Paddy McGuinness?
Take Me Out.
Yeah.
Take Me Out. yeah.
I think you know that programme very well, Imogen.
I remember Elle working on it.
Yeah. I went and worked on that for 10 days straight in Kent. Kind of didn't see any outside world for 10 days, but it was really fun. And so kind of worked my way up in TV, where I became an assistant producer, but on the side was always doing radio things. So I got a show on Roundhouse Radio, which is kind of a youth station in London, set in the dark danks of the Roundhouse venue. So I was doing that on Sundays and then going to work Monday to Friday. And then got really into podcasts and realised probably about 5 years into TV that I really should just be doing radio and making podcasts. So I sacked that all in, sacked TV in, and then became work experience at the grand old age of 26, which was a bit humbling, but then worked my way up from that, and now I'm a podcast producer.
Oh, okay. So how did you kind of decide on this career path? Because obviously, you know, you've studied philosophy and yourself, it's like you kind of started with the copywriting, but how did you kind of fall into this kind of pathway, or was there an alternative pathway prior to this?
There actually wasn't. I didn't really have a very, I didn't leave uni and have a good proper think about what I was going to do, which was maybe unwise. I would maybe suggest actually doing your research and having a real think about it. I was just kind of keen to make enough money to live out and move out of home. So I've never had much of a plan or a sense of what I would fall back on if this didn't work out. I think one thing I've realised the longer I've worked on it is that I'm definitely more interested in the creative side of writing and less in the kind of strategy and communication side of writing. So I think that's been really useful as a kind of learning process, because I think I'd probably rather retrain than only do the types of work for corporate and communications jobs. Not that they're not really fascinating roles, that they're less my bag.
Okay. And Elle?
I probably explained it a bit in my last answer, but I, as you heard, went down the TV route for 5 years. So
what would have been your alternative route? What else would you have done if it wasn't this route?
I really don't think I would have done anything else but broadcast media. I knew that I wanted to do it, went down the TV route, wasn't for me, went down into podcasts. I really don't think I could do anything else. Maybe I'd study again and do some, try and be a psychologist, but even the fact that I've said psychologist, which probably isn't a very official term, shows that I probably shouldn't be doing psychology.
Okay, so obviously bearing in mind this is a series of Seize the Day talks for our year 12 students, so what do you think are the important skills and qualities that our students need to develop moving into their career trajectory?
I think one thing I never had much of was initiative, and Elle has loads of it. It's like that gritty sense of like you're going to go out and do things, not because someone's asked you to or like given you permission to. I think I'm quite a hesitant person and I sort of wait to be invited to the table, and I think that's a trait that I should have worked on earlier, because actually in life no one is going to do that for you, and you've got to go out there and like make opportunities for yourself and also show how much you love something and how good you are at it by just doing it, without necessarily being given kind of everything on a plate.
Do you think that comes from confidence as well though?
Yeah, I think it definitely does come from confidence. I think I let my kind of fear of being like pushy or rejected get in the way, and actually now I see younger people coming up behind me and I don't at all judge them for being pushy and knocking on the door and being assertive and like having loads of kind of get up and go. I actually think it's a really admirable quality, and if you're going to be a journalist, it's actually a really vital quality.
Interesting. Okay. And yourself, Elle? What sorts of skills and qualities do you think you can impart? What do you think our students will need?
I totally agree with Imo, apart from the fact that she has loads of initiative as well. I've seen it. But I would say that you definitely just have to take responsibility for your own future. In school, I think you have teachers asking you to do things and asking you to do homework and making sure you're doing it. That doesn't happen in real life. And the sooner you realise that it's actually on your own back and it's for your own good that you're supposed to be doing these things, the better. So yeah, take responsibility for your own work, because once you get out of school, no one else will.
Okay, cool. All right, so what would you impress upon, what sorts of skills and things would you impress upon the students in terms of their CV or work experience applications? So what would be the key things what are the key noises they need to be making on their CVs and applications?
I think any professional experience you can get is great, and I wouldn't worry too much if it doesn't feel like it's directly relevant to the thing that you want to go on and do, because all experience is kind of applicable to lots of different things. So you can draw out the skills that you built working on a till or for a catering company, to say why you'd be really good kind of to work on this magazine because you've got, like, I don't know, brilliant skills at talking to people and things like that. So I think don't be too anxious that the opportunity you've got is not as good as your friends or whatever. I think just take what comes your way. And then I guess if I'm reading applications from younger people, I want to see that they've gone out and done things. Not someone that's sitting at home and kind of hoping that a cover letter that says they love art is enough to kind of prove that to me. So I think if there are things that you can start under your own steam, whether that's like an Instagram account of artists or similar, go for it, because that's the kind of thing that starts conversations and catches people's attention.
Okay. Yourself?
This is something I actually feel very strongly about. It's the one piece of advice I would give anyone writing a cover letter or a CV, is tailor it to the company you are writing it for, and make sure that they know in your cover letter exactly why you want to work there. I have seen so many CVs and cover letters more, that don't mention the company that they're writing it for. They just say, I've done this, here's my CV, done. And it's like, well, why do you want to work here? I have no idea about why you want to work here or why you think your skills would fit this particular company. And really it's kind of a wise thing to do. Just suck up to the company that you want to work for. Say some kind of shameless things, which will never be a bad thing to do, and make sure that they know that you're keen to work there specifically. Because if you just want to work in the radio industry or make podcasts, then go make podcasts. Why work here if you want to work here?
Yeah, and it's not just like what the job would do for you, but what you can do for the job, sort of thing. So it's not just, oh, this would be the brilliant next opportunity for me because I've done X and Y and now I want to go out and do this in the world. It's also like, what could you bring to the job? What's unique about your voice or your perspective or your experiences that they need, because they're also looking to fill a gap in their team.
Bring something to the table, make yourself stand out. Really important, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, obviously, I think you've kind of answered the question about how you can make yourself maximize your chances of success. I think what you're saying about being unique, totally agree with that. So let's kind of move on to the kind of interview phase, if you're successful enough to get shortlisted at that phase. So how can someone make a good impression at interview?
Well, I mean, nerves are normal, so I think just make peace with the fact that you'll be nervous and don't let it phase you too much if you can. Try and kind of take a deep breath and feel as kind of natural and at ease with the process as you can. You know, it's just a conversation. It can feel really awkward and unnatural, particularly some interviews are structured so every question is exactly the same for every candidate, which makes it feel like a very stiff and awkward exchange. And I know that's thrown me in the past, but it's difficult for the interviewer as well because they have to be completely fair. Candidates. So yeah, I always just try and kind of smile and look positive, even if I feel like a mess inside.
Cool.
I'm notoriously bad at interviews. I think I make a horrible first impression. So I think my first piece of advice would be, don't take rejection to heart if you don't get it. My second piece of advice would be the jobs that I have got through interviews are ones where I've spoken about more than just the job and the industry in general. I think particularly maybe in podcasts, because it's such a new industry, there's so much to say and everyone has their own opinion and everybody loves podcasts. That's probably why they're working on them. So where you can take it, obviously, as I said before, make sure you're talking about the company you're going to be working for or want to be working for, but then as well as that, expand by talking about the industry in general, and then that'll show that you've got a unique passion for it, that will hopefully differentiate you from other candidates.
Totally agree with that, because it shows that not only are you keen on the job, the company, but the sector. So it just gives you a bit more gravitas, doesn't it? Far more. It shows that you really want this. So it kind of also gives the impression that even if you don't recruit me, I am so passionate about this sector and I will still come into this sector. So it kind of shows that you understand it and you've got full understanding of it.
You'll see me down the line.
Exactly. And I think it's so powerful, because that is such a powerful tool to have, isn't it? It's like, yeah, you're right, you will see me. I totally agree with that. Okay, so in terms of motivation, how do you stay motivated in your current roles? Obviously we're all in, I wouldn't call it lockdown anymore, but we're in this kind of period of transition. So how do you stay motivated in your current role in general, and as well as our current situation?
Well, probably in my job, one of the kind of most rewarding things about making a magazine is that every issue is different, and every issue gives you an opportunity to commission different writers, different photographers, cover different types of stories. So I think for me, it's that feeling that every magazine we make is kind of a fresh slate, and that sometimes people higher up the food chain can like to just maintain the status quo, do things the safe way because they get done with relatively little pain. And, you know, that's fair. They've got families, they want to knock off at 6, and they kind of are not looking to reinvent the wheel, as it were. But I feel like I'm at a stage in my career where I really want each one to feel like a proper achievement, and like I've put loads of originality and ideas into it. And so I'm lucky that I've got a job where that's possible. So yeah, doing lots of research, like trying to think of writers that I might never have come across and see what they could bring to the magazine is probably the part that I find the most exciting.
Okay.
I totally agree with Imo. I'd say make sure that within your job, even if you're put on things that you have been asked to be put on that you wouldn't necessarily choose, find things that you do want to be working on and maybe do it a bit on the side. So for example, I'm working on 2 shows just as part of my producer duties, but then every so often briefs come in where I can write my own ideas for shows, and then when those go off they could be commissioned and I could be working on a program that I've made. So I think make sure that you're giving yourself incentives and little things that you want to be doing to make sure that you're motivated.
Yeah, it totally does help, and it's almost like it's something you can put in your toolbox for future reference, isn't it? Definitely, it's always good to do your job and then some, because it's that some that you will then breathe so much more life into at your next job interview.
Totally,
A little
just make sure you're always doing the parts of the job that you started the job for, and then the other parts make sure that they don't completely overcome your job role.
And that might even mean like asking to go to meetings that you've not been invited to, but being like, oh, actually for my development I'd find it really interesting to come along to that, like can I make the time in my day to join you guys, because I'm sick of just doing this photocopying kind of thing. That's all like well worth doing, even though it might not be written into your day-to-day kind of job description.
And if you don't ask, they won't know, and they're more like chances are that they'll go, of course you can, they just didn't realize that you were interested in that.
Exactly. And I suppose especially with the creative industry, I think we kind of know the average runner wants more, the average person that's, you know, getting in the food orders wants more, but they don't necessarily know what that is. So until, like you said, until you voice it, they've got no idea which area of media or which creative strand that you are actually hoping to follow. So you're right, absolutely right with that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, have you actually ever been unsuccessful in a job interview or application? And how did you what did you gain from that, or what was your learning outcome from the rejection?
Rejection. Yeah, I've been unsuccessful, and actually the job that I do now, I didn't get on applying. I got to second interviews and they picked someone else, and then the editor kind of stayed in touch a little bit, said, oh, you should pitch to write for the magazine, and then about 8 months later I did finally pitch, and he didn't want the story but said, do you want to go for a coffee, and said, oh, actually the person we recruited is moving abroad or something or other, so I can't really face doing the whole recruitment process again. If HR at the Royal Academy will allow it, like, would you still be interested in the job? And by this point I was freelance and I was finding it really hard to make ends meet, and I literally didn't want to like bite his hand off, but I was like, yes, I'm still interested. And then there was a bit of hoops to jump through and some internal candidates and things, so it was a bit unsure for a while, but then I did get it the second time round. So basically the fact that I went to the interview and didn't get it worked out in the long run.
And in terms of going in the second time and having that conversation, did you kind of go in with a different approach, or did you go in knowing that there was more of a possibility? Were you worried that it might not amount to that job because you already previously faced the no before?
No, when I was
emotions,
I genuinely thought he wants to discuss stories for the magazine. Like, I had no expectation at all. So when he said it, he was like, oh, I don't want to be rude, Imogen, I'm not saying your story ideas aren't interesting, but I've actually got a different proposition to offer you. I was like completely thrown, and you know when your like hands are shaking and you're like, oh my god, this is a job interview. But if I hadn't pitched him, he might not have thought of me, and he might just have gone back to HR and said, we need to re-advertise this job. I'd have seen it on Twitter or similar, and I might not have thought to apply again because I didn't get it first time around. And you don't know how close you are when you don't get something.
Very true.
It could be the second choice. One thing I would say is you can always ask for feedback if you've had an interview, and they should give you it.
Because you are so right, because I think when you don't get the job, you just assume because you just weren't the right candidate. But there are so many more permutations in terms of the decision making.
A whole host of reasons you might not have got something.
Yeah, exactly. And that importance to continue that dialogue, because I think sometimes we're under the impression that it's not going to be fruitful, having that kind of, it almost feels like fake dialogue, like hi, where is this going? Where is this really going? I'm wasting my time. But I think
it's a form of networking.
Yeah, exactly, that word, networking. But you've kind
dreaded
of
word.
Oh my gosh, I know. You've proved that it can be fruitful, and I think it's actually quite a positive, very powerful message to convey to our students, that kind of next chapter beyond rejection is a holding bay that actually could provide you with that success.
And now, I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like in the creative and media world, there's so many opportunities that aren't a salaried job. They are freelance little bits of work here and there. So getting in the room with two more senior people and having a chance to let them see you face to face and get a sense of who you are can never not be valuable, unless they decide that you're crap, but they're unlikely to. And so there's all sorts of little opportunities that might crop up, and they think, oh, like, actually that girl I met 3 weeks ago might be interested in this kind of thing.
And they're always looking for new ideas. They are. I think sometimes we have this illusion that those at the top, the all-seeing, all-knowing, almighty, have got it sussed. And it's sometimes that bright, energetic spark is just what they were looking for. So I think sometimes we're always under the impression that they've got it sussed up there, and they are looking for new talent. That's the whole point of creativity. Definitely. Elle, what are your thoughts on rejection and how you've overcome it?
I'd say I've been rejected a lot. The first time I applied for a show at the Roundhouse Radio, I didn't get it. I rang up the guy. I think I was crying.
Oh,
Maybe I wasn't, but I think he made me cry. He kind of got the wrong end of the stick, because I went in there saying that I had experience as a TV runner, and then when I rung up to see why I didn't get the show, he said, well, it's clear that you just want to be doing TV. And I was like, no, not at all. That's not at all what I wanted to convey. And he was like, well, it is. But, and he kind of, and I was like, well, is there anything I could do? Could I do shift work? Blah, 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 blah. And he said just a flat out no. And it really, really knocked my confidence for ages. And then the next year I was like, oh, I'll just apply again. And I don't think I got the show again either, but I did. I asked if there was anything else they needed help on, and then it turned out they needed someone to do a review show. So I got in that way. So I think it was the third time lucky, and definitely because I didn't do this before. And then this kind of taught me to do this, is just put your pride aside. Don't feel like you can't go back to the same thing again and again, because they'll appreciate that persistence and that it's clear that you really want it, and try not to let your pride get in the way. I know it's hard when you're like, well, I don't want them anyway, but there's the persistence will come through eventually in some form. So make sure that you don't let that be the be all and end all, because if I had, then I wouldn't have got a radio show, and I wouldn't have met the person who was a producer at the podcast company I worked at. And yeah, so things open up doors. Rejection opens up doors.
Yeah, it does. But also it's about having resilience, isn't it? I think that's what I'm getting from the both of you. It's having that inner core resilience to, you know, wipe the tears, wipe the kind of anxiety and the upset in terms of what's not gone your way. But then, okay, find drawing strength from that, that somehow you've managed to do that. And
be positive about it. So, you know, if you get a nice email from them saying, look, your application was unsuccessful, but we thought you were great and we really enjoyed meeting you, ask for feedback, but do it in a kind of gracious, positive way. Because I've had people we run an internship, and I've had people be interviewed and not get it. And I always send feedback and stuff and suggestions for how they can improve. And I've had quite defensive, quite rude emails back on occasion that I've just thought, oh, you're kind of burning a bridge now, because I thought that you were great and I was basically encouraging you to keep in touch, and now you've sent that, and it's just made a bad impression. So yeah, I would try and always be really kind of positive and enthusiastic, even when there's a setback.
And I think that's definitely something that all young people need to take into consideration, that things do stick. And I think obviously the generation that are now are very much social media savvy, and we always impart that whole impression of it's really important that you are in control of what you write and what you submit online, because it will be out there for eternity, in terms of job applications, in terms of your tweets and, you know, your Instagram, and all of that kind of that kind of digital imprint is just literally everywhere. And it kind of follows on from what you're saying as well, in terms of that whole graciousness in, okay, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I understand it must have been really competitive, and I was so glad to get the opportunity to meet you, kind of thing. It can be such a short note back. I also think not replying, personally, I always think that looks bad.
Interesting.
So I think if you get personalized feedback from an interviewer and you don't just reply, even to just be like, thanks so much, good to meet you too, I chalk that down as a bit bad, because the people who do then shine out as just a really lovely person, don't they?
Exactly. So if you could just highlight again, so when you do get that, thank you so much, I really appreciated that opportunity. How does that make you feel when you're reading that?
As an employer?
Yes.
It just makes me feel good about that person. And I'm the type of person that stores people away in my head. Maybe that's an editor's job. I store them in the back of my mind. And if things crop up elsewhere in the Royal Academy, I might be like, oh, I met this really great young person. Do you mind if I email them the opportunity? Because, we're all human. We base a lot on relationships, and I guess it feels a little bit like they've tried to form a little bit of a relationship with you. Yeah,
and I think also as humans, we're natural helpers. We like to help people. and it's a natural instinct. And when someone shows gratitude, you kind of want to help them more.
Yes.
So it's like a give and take, isn't it? It goes back and forward.
But also, I think if Imo has, the fact that Imo just said that she writes personalised responses to everyone, the fact that Imo has gone through that time to do that is, I think that's really commendable, and I'm not sure that I've done that necessarily. So to put that time in and then not to have people come back, I can see why that would be a bit annoying, because Imo doesn't have to do that. And she does spend her time doing that when she probably has deadlines. So I think it's, again, kind of reading between the lines, and if someone's helping you out, then help them out and your relationship can grow.
I think the other interesting thing about the kind of creative media, it becomes quite cyclical, doesn't it, in terms of it's about breaking that chain in how we treat one another. Because, for example, you said that scenario made you cry. Yeah, fair enough. And we don't know whether that scenario happened because that person had a similar experience when they were your age. And so they've kind of carried on that cyclical pattern of behavior. And someone's got to kind of stop that, because you are right. It's a balance between, well, you've got to be strong. The media industry is tough. It's cutthroat, and you've got to bite your lip and move forward and be strong. But at the same time, is it right to continue that pattern? So there's that fine line, isn't it, of being nice as recruiters. You've got a power of responsibility to kind of be that open book. You know, you're very clear about what you want and what you're looking for. But having said that, does it necessarily have to be tinged with that kind of no? So I think that's an interesting thing that I always find, because it's like you now as an adult, would you want to continue that pattern of behaviour?
Maybe you should be the psychologist.
Maybe.
Yeah, leave it to you.
But yeah, it does fascinate me in that respect, really, because I'd like to think that you wouldn't be that way with someone else, having you experienced.
I totally agree. Or maybe the guy was just fed up of having people who were in one industry, like kind of fair weather people, saying that they wanted to be in radio. So you never know what someone else has gone through or experienced. So try not to take that to heart, because all you can do is show your own experience and your own drive. And that will be accepted somewhere down the line. And that's another thing, I think, just don't take it to heart and just keep going, because you'll get there eventually. I think it's really easy to think you'll never get there, but especially if you're unemployed. I've had bouts of unemployment, and it's really, really tough. It really makes you feel awful, and you think that no one will ever want you and you'll never ever get there, but you do. If you don't give up, you do. So just don't give up, and you'll get there eventually.
Powerful words, absolutely powerful words. Okay, so final question. So what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
I would probably say ask more questions, and ask all the questions, and maybe even ask questions when you sort of know the answer, because the way in which people answer you can be really interesting and telling. I actually just read an interview with Michaela Cole, who is the actress and writer of that show I May Destroy You, and someone that worked with her was like, you have never met someone who asks so many questions. And I think that I was always a bit shy to do that when I'd get kind of my first job or a work experience placement. I thought that asking a question was in some way hassling people, or made me look stupid, or made me look ignorant. And actually it doesn't. It makes you look interested, and it makes you look curious, and it makes you look like the type of person that sees the world and like sees all of its kind of complexity and interest. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing to do. And also, when you're going to an interview, think carefully about what questions you're going to ask, because it can feel a bit like the kind of fag end of the interview, you know, like, oh, do you have any questions? No, thanks, bye. But if someone has a really well thought question to ask at the end, that can make a really positive impression on the interviewer.
I totally agree with IMO, I would say my biggest advice would be people expect you not to know things when you're work experience or an intern. And I always thought I kind of needed to know everything. And that would stop me from even, say, when I was first doing radio shows, I wouldn't ask people for help on how to operate the system, because I thought they would expect me to know it. When of course they don't expect me to know that. No one's going to know how to operate a radio desk until they're taught it. But if you don't ask, they assume that you know it. And then you just, I spent the whole of the first 2 years of having a radio show, having my friend come in and do the CD tracking for me, because I was too afraid to show that I didn't know how to do it. And then of course it gets harder and harder to ask 2 years, 3 years down the line. So just ask it to begin with, and ask it again and ask it again until you understand it.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing I'd do. I'd nod and smile when they'd show me, and then they'd go out the room and it would go in one ear, out the other, because I was too concerned with making it look like I did know what I was doing. Yeah. And then I still wouldn't learn. So like Emma says, just ask questions and be shameless about it, because people don't expect you to know things when you're work experience. And I wish someone had told me that when I was young.
And they'd rather you ask than bluff.
Yeah, exactly. Then they're like, why hasn't your show been playing? Because I don't know how to use a desk.
It's very true, and that can cause even more confusion down the line, can't it? It just becomes even more muddled. Totally. Yeah. You're literally tying yourself up in knots for nothing. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. That has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. I know you're both very, very busy, but we got there in the end.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
Really, really appreciate that. So I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks so much.